Looking back on it, it was great at that moment, but looking back on it from this perspective now in 2023, it was a whole lot more special and has become a whole lot more special over the years than I even realized it was in the beginning.
I could say Bill Anderson needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him. Bill's a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. And, of course, he's a member of the Grand Ole Opry and has been a member of the Grand Ole Opry since July 1961. That's 62 years, y'all. Amazing. No one has ever been a member of the Opry cast longer than Bill. He celebrated that milestone in July. Of course, in addition to being enormously popular as a recording artist and a TV host over the years, he's a major league songwriter. I've got to read some of the names that he's written songs for besides himself. You know, he's had he's had over 80 chart hits himself. He's written hits for Willie Nelson, Charlie Pride, George Strait, Kenny Chesney, Brad Paisley and Alison Krauss, Van Morrison, James Brown, Aretha Franklin, Dean Martin. I could go on for a very long time. I'll just add, maybe some of you know this piece of trivia, in the famous documentary film done about Bob Dylan back in the 60s, Bob Dylan actually calls out Bill Anderson's song 3 a.m. as a great song. Enough said. Yeah. So joining Bill on this illustrious panel is his longtime colleague at the Opry, Jeannie Seely. Yeah. And she is looking really sharp today. Wait till you see what she's dressed in. Jeannie's been an Opry member for 56 years. Not much behind Bill, really. Like Bill, Jeannie's both a hit recording artist and a skilled songwriter. She won a Grammy for one of her recordings, and she's written songs for Merle Haggard, Dottie West, Farron Young, Connie Smith, and more. And I think many of you know every Sunday she hosts Sundays with Seely on XM Sirius, so tune that in. We're also fortunate to have one of the great executives in the history of the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville with us. It's Bud Wendell is with us. Yeah. Like Bill Anderson, he's a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. He is also the former board chair of the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, and he served as the Opry's manager during a key time of transition, and then he was so good at that, they bumped him upstairs, and he was the CEO of Gaylord Entertainment, the Opry parent company, for many, many years. He retired in 1997. And finally, we're really blessed today. We have country star Mark Wills on the panel. Yeah. He's been an Opry member since 2019, a country hit maker since the late 90s. I'm sure you know some of his signature hits. I Do, Cherish You, Don't Laugh at Me, 19-something, and Wish You Were Here. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome our panel. Bill Anderson, Jeannie Seely, Bud Wendell, and Mark Wills. We've got a little film clip we want to show here now.
Uh-oh.
So, fire it up.
What do you think it is that makes country music so fascinating to people?
Oh, I like the rhythm, the fastness, the speed of it. I don't know, it gives you a lift.
Fans, 2 4-quarter. Opry's not air conditioned. You're liable to sweat to death.
Fans stand in line for hours in 90-degree heat waiting to get in. What makes you such an Opry fan, late man?
I've always loved it. We love everything about it.
I didn't like the long-haired songs that they sang for opera. Now they have long-haired songs that just don't make nothing but noise to me. I like country singing, and I think these people here really has it.
Even the younger performers, such as Bill Anderson, are full of that old Opry spirit.
I think the Grand Ole Opry is probably a combination of Yankee Stadium, Hollywood, and heaven to country music people. And I think that it's just about the ultimate as far as a country music fan and a performer is concerned.
Love is a sometimes thing. Your love is a sometimes thing.
Country music is kind of a people-to-people music. It says things the way people actually feel them. We don't beat around the bush in our songs. If blue's blue, we say it.
Isn't that great? That's fantastic. I think you all noticed that was a CBS News spot from 1970. Bill, do you remember anything about that moment?
I was never that young. Yeah, I remember when, people would come and ask you, describe the Grand Ole Opry. I had forgotten what I said, but that was a pretty good answer, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, you summed it up perfectly. So, Bill, as I was saying in the introduction, so you're the cast member who's had the longest tenure in the history of the Opry, which is amazing. Can you take us back to the first, when you got invited to be a member of the Opry? What was that like?
Well, it was incredible. It really was. I've told the story many times. I was sitting at home on a warm July afternoon in 1961 watching the All-Star baseball game on television, and the phone rang. And I thought, who in the world would be calling me in the middle of something as important as the All-Star baseball game? I almost did not get up and answer the phone. Finally, I thought, well, the only way it's going to stop ringing is if I get up and answer it. So I did. And the voice on the other end of the line was a voice I had heard many times because he had been an announcer on the Grand Ole Opry before he became the general manager. He had been an announcer, a disc jockey, a personality on WSM radio, a man named Ott Devine. And Ott didn't beat around the bush. He was not a man of many words. I answered the phone, hello, and he said, Bill, this is Ott Devine. How would you like to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry? And that's like saying, how would you like to go to heaven when you die? I mean, it was, I forgot all about the baseball game.
Do you remember what you said when you said that?
Well, I'm sure I said yes. Goodness gracious, of course I did. But the thing about it, today, Paul, when they make somebody a member of the Opry, it's kind of like a coronation. Mark Wills went through that. But when Jeannie and I joined, you came about 3 years, I think, after I joined, and when we joined, it wasn't that big of a thing. He asked me on a Tuesday, and they inducted me as a member on Saturday. And there was a little line in the paper on Monday said Saturday night, Bill Anderson was made the 61st member of the Grand Ole Opry. And that's all it was, big deal.
At least they sent a press release, right? At least they did that, but no, I know what you mean. So what did that mean to you to be inducted into the Opry at that point, early in your career? How did that feel?
It was very special then, but can I be honest with you?
Please.
It's more special now.
Really?
Looking back on it now, I realize what that really was. I had guested on the Opry. Mr. Devine had been very kind to me in the 2 or 3 years I had been in Nashville. He had let me perform on the Opry on quite a few occasions, so it wasn't like it was totally brand new. But becoming a member, I mean, that was kind of the icing on the cake. But looking back on it, it was great at that moment. But looking back on it from this perspective now in 2023, it was a whole lot more special and has become a whole lot more special over the years than I even realized it was in the beginning.
Okay. I want to make sure our other panelists know in a few minutes after I finish talking to Bill about this, we are going to get a chance for you to talk about what the Opry has meant to you. Bill, I remember you telling me at one point that there was some point in your career early on where you're thinking you might leave the Opry. Maybe it wasn't the thing for you, and your dad had some very strong words for you at that point. What did he tell you?
There were quite a few people leaving the Opry in the late 50s and early 60s, people that had been big stars. Webb Pierce, Carl Smith, little Jimmy Dickens even left for a while. Farron Young, Ferlin Husky, a lot of these people. And I came to find out there were two reasons, really, primarily, that they were leaving. The number one reason was financial, because with all due respect, Mr. Wendell, y'all weren't paying us very much back in those days. We go down on a Saturday night, we'd come back in from out on the road somewhere and you know, bust our tails to get back in here for a Saturday night Opry to make $18.75.
Oh, my goodness.
And the sidemen, the musicians, were making $11. And the managers and the booking agents were coming to the people like Webb and Carl and Farron and Ferlin and saying, you know, you can make so much more money out on the road. Why are you killing yourself to come back in here? The Opry's just a radio show. And those days, television was relatively new and was beginning to take over. The Opry did not have a television presence to amount to anything in those days. And they were saying, hey, guys, you know, you can make so much more money on the road. And these people were doing it. And I was very tempted. I was managed at the time by the same man that was managing Farron Young and Ferlin Husky, a man named Hubert Long. And Hubert was trying to tell me, son, you can stay out on the road and make a whole lot more money and have a lot less travel, you know, that you have to endure and put up with. But there was something that told me maybe this isn't all that glitters isn't really gold. My dad was a good businessman. Bud knew my dad quite well. They both came from a background in the insurance business. And I went to Atlanta and I talked to my dad and I said, they're trying to get me to leave the Opry. I said, what do you think I should do? And he said, son, let me tell you something. He said, those people at the Grand Ole Opry did not become successful by being stupid. He said, they are smart people. He said, they have got some things. I just feel it in my bones. They're going to do some great things with that Grand Ole Opry, and I think you need to stay there. And it was less than 2 or 3 years that they announced they were going to open a park called Opryland USA. Shortly after that, they're going to put a television network on the air called the Nashville Network. I was so glad looking back. And I thank my dad to this day for that wonderful advice. He just simply said they didn't become successful by being stupid.
That's great.
And you need to stay there. And I stayed, and I thank God every day that I did.
Well, we're glad too. So, Bill, there are many Opry members you're close with because you've been there so long, people who admire you. And one of them wanted to be here today, but he couldn't. So he sent a little video clip, just, you know, show his appreciation for you. So could we run that video?
Hey, Bill. Sorry. Hey, Bill. Didn't mean to yell. Listen, I'm so excited for you. I need to talk softer. I'm so excited for you to be in this amazing place called the Hall of Fame. In all seriousness, this friendship and this collaboration that we've had for many years, as well as just the chance to get to learn from you and have adventures with you in our little group of singing cowboys. And I'm telling you, what an amazing life, what an amazing career you have had. May it continue on for many, many, many years. And also your writing and your creativity and your heart and compassion and your sense of humor and your quick to laughter, all of these things about you are just these endearing things that I'm so proud to be your friend and so proud to know you. It feels like I'm shouting at you right now, but I really do feel so strongly that you have belonged here for so long. And anyway, softer, Bill, it's more effective.
You know what he calls me, don't you?
What does he call you?
He calls me Moses.
Why is that?
Well, we were writing a song one day. Me and Brad and John Randall were all over at Brad's house, and we were writing a song. And there's John Randall is sitting there with his computer and his laptop and all of his gizmos with his guitar. And Brad has got he's a techie from way back, and he's got foot pedals and hand pedals and all kinds of stuff. And they're writing on these computers, and I'm sitting over there with a number 2 pencil and a piece of paper.
Old school.
And Brad stops right in the middle, and he looks over there. He says, Hey, Moses, when did you quit writing with a hammer and chisel?
It's too funny.
I said, yeah, but let me tell you something. This pencil and paper has never crashed. And
That's
in about
right.
3 days, he called me up. He said, you got a copy of that song we wrote the other day? My computer crashed.
That's great. Well, speaking of long friendships like you and Brad have had, Jeannie has been a longtime friend of yours on the Opry. And Jeannie, I want to tell everybody this is a special day for you too, because today marks your 56th anniversary as an Opry member.
Yes, thank you.
I want to ask you a little bit about kind of like what I was asking Bill. You got invited at a certain point, and how did that feel? What happened? What was that?
I think I just wore Mr. Divine down. Between him and Hal Smith, because I was so new to Nashville, and so I was working through Hal Smith Artist Agency. And at the time, Don't Touch Me was out. It was climbing the charts. I was on the road with Porter, which is another whole story. We could do a whole nother interview panel
Maybe
thing
we
about
should.
working with Porter. But anyway, which was great, by the way, I'm joking. But anyway, they would call me and tell me where my record moved, and my answer was, that's great, but did Mr. Divine call? And of course he hadn't. And so I kept saying, please, somebody call Mr. Divine. Does he know I want to be a part of the Opry? Maybe he doesn't know, and I kept on until finally, I came in off the road and I was talking to Hal, and Hal said, well, the last two artists I took to the Grand Ole Opry promised me they would be loyal, but they weren't. And he said, so I said, I am never going to go to bat for another artist again. And I looked at him and I said, I didn't do that. And I won't do that. Please give me a chance. And so Hal said, well, you're right. It's not your fault what they did. So he said, I'll talk to him. So he did talk to Mr. Divine, and so he just, like I said, I think Mr. Divine said, just sign her.
So you don't remember any magic moment where he called you on the phone like Bill was called by Opry?
But the magic moment was when Hal told me on the phone that he had talked to Ott, and Ott said, okay, let's bring her in. Let's do it. So
September 1967, right?
yeah, September 16th, 1967.
Amazing. So you were starting your career at that point. You've been doing it for a few years. Did you already know Bill when you joined the Opry? Had you guys ever worked together in any way?
Let's see. I think I met Bill at the Opry. I made my debut, if you will. I mean, just like Bill said, there was no big to-do. I didn't get a private parking place, anything, because I was making a debut. But on May 28th of 66, I made my debut. And I made 2 or 3 guest appearances on the Opry after that. And I remember meeting Bill. The thing is, I had grown up listening to the Grand Ole Opry my whole life, but I had never been to the Grand Ole Opry until I was on it. So I was standing shoulder to shoulder with my heroes that I had never even seen in person, even across the footlights. So it was pretty awesome. So for me to remember specific things, it's just all a sea of absolute wonderfulness to me.
So I've got to ask you, though, so since you'd never actually been in the audience at the Opry and that you were with your heroes, you guys were at the Ryman at that point. Were you kind of surprised at the at what they had that was considered a green room for you guys? I mean, I hear that conditions weren't great backstage at the Opry.
Well, I wasn't used to much. Of the places I had worked, we didn't have. Well, yeah. I just remember being so excited to be there, and if it was good enough for everybody else, it was sure good enough for me. One of my favorite memories of that time, though, was all the girls did not have a dressing room at all. We were in the ladies' room, and so with all the crinolines and ruffles, you know, you kind of had to stand back. And I remember I was standing back there because I was so new, I didn't know what to say or do, and just trying to be out of the way. And Jean Shepherd said, "Here, Celie," she handed me her hairbrush. She said, "Here, Celie, fix the back of my hair." And I thought, oh, I don't know anything about doing hair, and this is Jean Shepherd, one of my heroes. But I took the brush and I did what I could do and handed it back, and she just chuckled and said, "Thank you." And it wasn't until later that I realized what she had done. She didn't need me to fix her hair. She just saw how uncomfortable I was, and she did that to make me feel I was one of them.
That's a beautiful gesture she did
Yeah.
for you. Bill, I'm just curious, you know, we always hear about the women had just the women's restroom as their dressing room. Back at the Ryman, what did the men have?
The ladies' room.
That's today.
Hey.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. We had the men had a couple of rooms, but by the time you put Hank Snow and his Rainbow Ranch Boys, Ernest Tubb and his Texas Troubadours, Bill Anderson and his Po' Boys band in those days, and into one of those little tiny rooms. I mean, there wasn't room to hardly change your mind. There was a restroom. We did not have to dress in the restroom like the women did, but our conditions were pretty crowded.
Yeah. So I'm going to toss it now to Bud. You moved into the Opry manager slot in 1968. What did getting that position as the Opry general manager mean to you, Bud, back in '68 when you got that position?
It's on? No. Well, obviously, I came out of a totally different environment.
Insurance sales, right?
I was in the insurance business for the National Life and Accident Insurance Company. And I'm sure people are aware of the fact that the Opry was a promotional vehicle for the Grand Ole Opry and vice versa. So coming out of the insurance industry, I was still part of National Life family. And it was a shock, among other things.
Were you surprised that they took you from being an insurance person to like, hey, you're running the Opry now?
Very much so. I didn't know any of the artists to speak of hardly. And the Opry, as Bill mentioned, had gone through some turmoil and turnover, if you will, and quite a few acts of significance left. And it needed sort of a helping hand. It needed somebody to come in and could steady it and smooth over the rough spots and show that we really did love them. And show them that we loved them, because we weren't doing anything. As Bill said, you got $18.75. I didn't remember it was that much, Bill, but we didn't pay much of anything. And then we told him you had to be there every Saturday night. And then we finally reduced it. You only had to be there for 26 Saturday nights. And then I think we even went to 20 nights. There were restrictions on being a member, on the number of times you came. So it was a totally different animal than going to people's stores. For years, I guess I made a living out of knocking on people's doors.
For insurance?
For insurance. And I'd knock on their door and I'd say, "Hi, my name is Bud Wendell. I'm with the National Life and Accident Insurance Company. We're the company that brings you the Grand Ole Opry. That's our broadcasting service." And we have another service, a service of financial security, if you'd let me in. This evening, I'd like to come back and meet with you and your husband and tell you about that service. And I did that thousands of times, and come out of that kind of an atmosphere into the show business world was a total different shake, I'll tell you.
Was it fun once you got used to it? Did you enjoy being that Opry general manager?
It was the finest job I ever had. It really was.
Well, and you've been the CEO.
Really was. Once I got over the shock and became friends with Bill's parents, two of the finest people, would come with Bill when he would play Saturday night. They'd come up from Atlanta, or was it Atlanta? His dad was in the insurance business. I'd been in it. So we kind of became good friends and acquaintance. And I made it my, I guess, target or goal at least to try to create a family atmosphere and make the artists feel like they were wanted, they were appreciated, and do what we could to help them. In addition, to give them a little bit of a raise once in a while. Not much, but a little bit of a raise once in a while. But it was a learning experience, to say the least.
How are these two troublemakers to work with?
Wonderful, wonderful. I was asking Jeannie if they still have fun. You know, the artists have a good time at the Opry. They really do, or they at least used to have a good time with each other. Jeannie and Gene Shepard and Dottie West, Jeannie Pruitt, they'd all get together and work up a song backstage that they didn't record. It was just for the audience out there, and the audience loved that sort of a thing. And the artist really enjoyed the Opry, and it to think back about the Gully Jumpers and the Fruit Jar Drinkers and Sam and Kirk McGee and some of them that have long since gone. It was a different type of an atmosphere and a different experience, and one that we'll probably never see again. But I hope they still have a good time working the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah, what would you say, Bill and Jeannie? Is it still fun?
We make it fun. I'm going to make sure there's some laughter somewhere.
Last night at the Opry was the 25th anniversary as Opry members for the group, the Old Crow Medicine Show. And backstage, after their performance, they had a cake. And on the side, it was like a sheet cake, and on the side it had Old Crow Medicine Show. And so I walked over to the table and I said, give me the piece that's got old written on it. And they said, somebody else has already gotten that. And Gina Keltner, who's the talent coordinator at the Opry, Gina walked up and said, give him the next word. I've always wanted to see Bill Anderson eat crow. So that's the kind of atmosphere. And Jeannie's right. And I've seen nights when things would be kind of down, and that lady right there, she'll make sure before it's over that we're having a good time.
Yeah,
or somebody
right.
else will. Yeah.
That's great. So, Mark, you joined the Opry in 2019. What did that invitation to join the Opry mean to you?
Oh, man.
Make something up.
You know, I can remember being a kid and dreaming of going to the Grand Ole Opry. You know, as Bill said, you know, he had played there a couple of years. Jeannie had played there a couple of times. I had been playing there since 1997. So I had played there pretty much my whole career. And, you know, and everybody's dropping dates. So you were talking about 62, you were talking about, you know, and I was just going to throw out that August the 8th, 1973, that's when I was born. That's a good picture. I didn't know y'all had that one. No, you know, for me, it was something that I didn't expect. You you know, I had played there. Not that I was counting, but I had played there 256 times. When I had played there 256 times when I was asked to be an Opry member, and so I had really not even thought that, you know, I had all of my hits back in, you know, from 96, 2003, 2004, you know, something like that. So, you know, by 2018, I thought, man, I'm never going to be an Opry member. I'm just going to play here for the rest of my career for as many times as, you know, they'll let me come and play. And so I was blown away, to say the least, when I was asked to be an Opry member.
We actually have a video clip of that night when you were invited to become a member. So can we roll that, please?
You want to watch me cry, don't you?
Young brother, I don't really want to sing a song with you just yet. You got to look at the picture, dummy. Before he came out there, I said, hey, let's sing something together. He goes, oh, okay, and what do you want to do? Oh, we'll think of something. And then he came out, and I was just kidding. I don't want to sing with you. I want to ask you to, you know, be the next member, and it got him good. We at the Opry would love to ask you to become the next member of the Grand Ole Opry.
It was one of the most emotional moments of my career. So it sort of shocked me. And everybody that is a friend of mine and knows what this means to me is literally blowing my phone up.
I wish whoever was texting would stop texting me. But thank you, whoever you are. My mama.
The fact that Mark loves this music, loves this place, and has a reverence for it is special. You need people like him to keep this thing on the right track. He's a great addition.
So every picture that I ever had with Vince Gill, he was telling me I was number one. You know what I mean by that?
No.
Every picture that I ever had with Vince Gill, he was going, seriously. And that night, he and I had probably 15 to 20 pictures at different places, 3rd and Lindsley, different places. And I would take a picture with him. And every time I would take a picture with him, he would flip me off. And I knew that when he called me out on stage that night, that was the one picture I could take with Vince Gill that he wouldn't flip me off.
That's great.
And that's why I was taking that picture. And so, and again, now you have to understand too, that night was not about me.
Yeah, please. You were telling me something back in the green room about that.
That night was the night that we were honoring the late Jimmy Capps for 60 years of playing guitar on the Grand Ole Opry. And so Vince, you know, you guys, I mean, I wasn't an Opry member. So when we started talking about how we were going to honor Jimmy Capps in his 60th year, I had no pull. I mean, nobody was going to listen to me. What was I going to do? Walk into Sally Williams' office and go, here's what we need to do. You know, it wasn't going to happen. So I called Vince and I was like, hey man, you know, they're getting ready. This is going to be, you know, Jimmy's 60th year. He started in December of that year. It's going to be his 60th year. I need to do something to honor him because he'd been there longer than any other band member that I knew of. And so all evening long, man, it was all about Jimmy Capps. I mean, Marty was there and they named the band room at the Opry House the Jimmy Capps Music Room. And all evening they had presented him with different accolades, different things, different treasures honoring Jimmy that night. And so, you know, I get done with my songs and I go to walk off the stage, and literally as I'm walking off the stage, Vince just sort of takes me by the arm and he goes, hey man, come back out here and let's close the night. Let's close the night with a song together. And I said, okay, what do you want to do? And straight off the cuff, he goes, let's sing Pocket Full of Gold. And I'm thinking, it's Christmas time and we're going to end the Opry with a cheating song? on December 21st of 2018. I was thinking, man, I came to he and Amy's show the night before at the Ryman. I was thinking we were going to do Santa Claus is Coming to Town or something like that. You know, I had no idea because that entire evening had been honoring Jimmy Capps. And so I had no inkling that night was going to turn out to be a tip of the hat to me.
Boy, but it was a great moment, obviously.
It certainly
and
was.
A great way to close that show.
Oh, whew. I get emotional just thinking about it.
Could I just say that
Please.
to me, you talk about the fun in the Opry family. Being allowed to invite somebody to be a member, is that not a wonderful feeling? That just means the world to me, that I was allowed to invite my little sister, Rhonda Vincent.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeannie, and tell us, besides Rhonda, are there a couple others that stand out in your mind that you were so glad you were able to invite?
Well, the only other one I had a part in is when they asked if Jimmy Dickens would dress up as Santa Claus, and I dressed up. They said, "Will you dress up as Mrs. Claus?" I said, "Hell no, I'm not wearing those ruffles. I will dress as Ms. Claus with the long Santa coat." And we got to invite Brad Paisley to become a member, and of course Bill did the induction on that. So wasn't that a fun night?
I've had the opportunity to invite 3 or 4 different people, Brad Paisley included, and most recently, just a few weeks ago, we surprised Sarah Evans down at the Ryman Auditorium, and she's going to become a new member on October the 7th. It's a wonderful feeling to be able to invite somebody and to look them in the eye and see. Most of the time, it's really a surprise. Even though they may have had some hint that it was going to happen. But it's so much fun to see that look on their face and know what they're feeling.
Well, let me tell you what I did to Rhonda so that she wouldn't have any idea that's what I was going to, because I thought if I just walk back out there, she might think something. And so right before she went on, I said, "But when you finish, don't run off, because I want to come back out and talk to you about your new album that's coming out." So she thought that's what I was going to talk about. So I said, "Wait a minute before you leave. You got a brand new album. Tell us about that." And so she real quick, I said, "Have one more question." And it was all I could do to get it out, because I knew in the picture you see her, she's saying, "Are you serious?" I treasure that picture in that moment, but that's what I did so that she wouldn't have any idea.
So let's go back even farther in time, and I want to come back to you, Bill. So you're the longest tenured cast member. Who are some of the legendary figures who've passed on that you got to work with, that you got to know at the Opry? Any particular people really come to mind as like, that person, they were so interesting or they were so great?
Yeah, I don't have to even think about that question, because I had the opportunity in the late 70s to invite Roy Acuff to sing on a record with me in a song called "I Wonder If God Likes Country Music." And I had known Mr. Acuff, you know, as we all knew each other, and we toured together in various things. But I got to know him on a whole different level once we made this record together. And we performed it many, many times at the Opry. It turned out to be either the last or the next to the last song that he ever sang on the Grand Ole Opry, the night that he made his final appearance, and we sang that song. And so many times it was so very special. And you know, I learned, you know, Mr. Acuff would not, as great and a veteran and artist as he was, he would not go on that stage and sing that song unless we rehearsed it.
I've heard that about him.
Every night, I said, "Would you like to do our song tonight?" "Yes." "Where are we going to rehearse it?" "Your dressing room or mine?" And what a consummate professional he was. And I admired him so much. and I miss him. Him and Minnie Pearl, I guess those are the two that, they're in that picture. I loved both of them, and one of the things I loved so much was the love they had for each other. And if you ever doubt that love, you go look at that statue at the Ryman Auditorium of Roy Acuff and Minnie Pearl, that bronze statue. You can see the love in their eyes just in that beautiful statue, and you can see it right there in that picture. And what a privilege it was for me to be sitting there with the two of them.
They'd worked together since the early 1940s and toured, and you know they had so much history between the two of them. Jeannie, I'm wondering, you know, that same question I asked Bill. Are there any legendary figures that you worked with at the Opry that really stand out in your mind as like, wow, I can't believe I got to work with this person?
Well, there are several, really. Talking about reaching and handing a helping hand. Ernest Tubb, really early on. Of course, there again, going back to Hal Smith's artist agency. And so Ernest put me on the Midnight Jamboree real soon, and then eventually put me on his television show, and gave me one of the greatest compliments because I was working some road shows with them because of the TV show. When they'd work major markets, I could fly there. But on the secondary markets, there was no way for me to get there. He had said he had a bad experience, and I don't know who, and I didn't want to ask, but he had said the rule, no girls on the Troubadour bus. But finally, Hal said, can you work with us on this? Would you try this with Jeannie? Because these markets want her, and we can't get her there. She doesn't ride the bus. So he said, okay, another one of those. I didn't do anything, so don't make me pay for somebody else's mistake. But anyway, he said, we'll give it a try. So I traveled to several on the bus with them, and Hal asked him later, said, how was it working with Jeannie on the bus? And he said, you never know, there's a girl on the bus. So I took that as a great compliment. Of course, Dottie West, I met Dottie earlier. I've got to credit her for being so influential in me making the move to Nashville when I did. Because when she said, you've got to move to Nashville, and I'm like, I don't know enough to move there. And she said, that's where you learn. And boy, was she right, because this is where you got to learn. So then, and of course, Porter giving me the first opportunity to work the road. That meant an awful lot. And I don't know, just all of them that I've met, everybody gave me something so special to me. Jimmy Dickens, asking me to produce an album on him the year that I was 40 and he was 60. And I was just amazed that because I didn't have any experience doing that. And I asked him one time, I said, why did you ask me to produce this? And he said, didn't you want to? I said, yes, but this is kind of out of the norm, you know, for a female to be asked to produce anyway, with no experience. And he said, well, anybody who could write a song called She Always Got What She Wanted, Lord, I wish that she'd wanted me. He said, I want you to put that feeling in the whole album. So Dickens was always so special.
That's fantastic. Bud, do you have any special performers that really stand out in your mind from your time when you were the general manager of the Opry?
Yes. I love bluegrass music, and Bill Monroe is the epitome of bluegrass, and such a fine gentleman, not well known by a lot of people. Bill wasn't the easiest person in the world to get acquainted with. He was a little bit standoffish and had a little cult that was close to him, and other than that, he was very much an individual. But I tried, in the years that I managed the Opry at least, to promote country music. I started country music, the opening show for the Music Week. I don't guess they do it anymore, but Early Bird Bluegrass Festival, we used to call it, to give the bluegrass guys more exposure, because they really had a hard time.
Are you talking about it at Fanfare, the show at Fanfare?
Yeah.
The bluegrass show?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do they still do an Early Bird Bluegrass? I doubt it.
Don't believe they do.
I don't think anybody listens to bluegrass but me, maybe.
Oh, yes, they do.
We listen to bluegrass.
Really.
I thought one of the most emotional things, Bill and I got to be good friends, and he invited me once to come up to Watermelon Park at Bean Blossom, Indiana. He was going to do a performance there on a Sunday, and so Saturday night he said, "You are coming up tomorrow." Well, he'd never asked before that, and I frankly had other things, maybe mowing the grass or something, I don't remember, but I hadn't planned to go. But I said, "Well, I'm sure try, Bill." And so I thought about it, and I did. I went up and met his brother Birch at the parking lot, who was collecting the money for the park, and you remember. And it was a great experience. Flat and Scruggs, I remember, were on the show, and after everybody, all the performers had performed, when Birch saw me, he said, "Hurry up and get backstage because Bill wants to see you." Well, backstage was kind of a shed back there that maybe held off a little of the rain. And so I said, "Well, what's he want?" He said, "I don't know. You have to go back and see him." So I went back, and he said, "Go ahead. Let's get this show started. Go ahead. We run them on." And so in his mind, he thought he had invited me to come and MC the show. Well, I did. I mean, I'm not an MC, but I did go on and MC the show. And when it was all over, he had all the acts that performed come back on stage, and he took the wad of money that he got from Birch out of his pocket and started peeling it off and paid each of them whatever he had originally booked them for. I don't remember. Anyhow, he got to me. He peeled off $300 for me. And I said, "Bill, I didn't come up here to be your MC. I didn't MC your show. No. You got to take this. No. You have to take this money." And that was the way he was. And he invited me then to come to Uncle Penn's gravesite. And I guess that was the most emotional thing I ever had. He invited me to go up to Bean Blossom, Indiana, where our Uncle Penn is buried, and Bill had built or had a huge stone for Uncle Penn's grave that Bill had designed, and had flowers on it. It was a beautiful big stone, huge stone. And the only people he invited were the Bluegrass Boys and me. And I felt so honored to be invited to that ceremony because it meant so much to Bill.
And of course, as many people know, Uncle Penn, was a real mentor musically to Bill Monroe, and he's got that famous bluegrass classic song that he wrote about his Uncle Penn that, of course, Ricky Skaggs made a hit with all over again years later. That's a fantastic story. I'm just wondering, Mark, of course, you're a newer member of the cast. Are there any particular legendary figures you've interacted with that just kind of blew you away that you were actually getting to work with them?
Absolutely. Talked about Little Jimmy. Little Jimmy was awesome. But I think Little Jimmy liked me, but he loved my daughters. He loved my kids, my girls, when they were little. And one of my favorite memories of Little Jimmy was he would come in the Opry, and if he was, and typically back in those days, I was always in dressing room number 5, which is the one dedicated to the military now. And he would always walk by, and if I was in there, you know, if you knew little Jimmy, I mean, he was stove up, and he would kind of look at you with his eyes, and he would go, "Howdy," and just keep right on walking. But if the girls were there, he would be like, "Hello, ladies," and he would come in. And I remember one time my youngest daughter, Macy was like, I don't know, 5, maybe 6, and we're sitting in the dressing room. She comes walking in, and you have to understand Macy. Macy is very, very sassy at 5. She walks in, she puts that hand on her hip, and she goes, "Daddy, I got a boyfriend." And I was kind of sitting on the couch, and I said, "You do?" And she goes, "Yep, little Jimmy Dickens." And I said, "All right." And I go to, kind of make the old man noises. I'm like, start to stand up. And she goes, "Daddy, you know why I'm his girlfriend?" And I said, "No." She goes, "I'm his size." Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, like, I love little Jimmy. Love Jim Ed Brown. Jim Ed was always very, very kind. Loved Jean Shepherd. Loved Miss Jean. And actually, as a matter of fact, Miss Jean passed away right before I became an Opry member. And I remember one night she walked out on stage. She was hosting the segment we were on. And we had a fill-in bass player who, we had told like a week before, "Hey, here's the 2 songs, or here's whatever we're gonna do so you can, familiarize yourself with the songs." Miss Jean walks out on stage and she says, "I hear you have a new song." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, we do. We're not gonna play that one tonight." And she goes, "Yes, you are." And I said, the bass player doesn't typically play with us. And she goes, "That's fine, he'll learn." And I turned around and looked at our bass player. I was like, "Dude, I'm sorry." Fortunately, he was a great musician. Jumped right in, played the new song. No hiccups. Nobody else probably in the crowd knew that, that transpired. But as I became a new member, when they gave me my locker in the backstage area, I found out that it was Miss Jean's locker, and so I, in honor of her, went out and found her very first promotional photo that actually still to this very day hangs in my locker, to keep her as part of being that. Because you say, oh, hold on. There's a reason. She haunts that place. I'm telling you right now.
Yes, she does.
Every time they gave me my locker, and every time I go to my locker and punch my code in, it doesn't work. And I have to go get the master key and reset the code. And I'm telling you, it's because she still thinks she's there, and that's her locker. So I put her picture up in my locker to appease her that it's okay to share. It's okay to share. And so to this day, I keep Miss Jean with me.
Yeah, I will tell you that she wanted you to be a member. She talked about you.
Really?
I think she had a crush on you, but I didn't blame her. No, seriously, she said, "Mark, now he's the real deal. He needs to be here." And she was right, by the way.
That's cool. That's very cool.
So, Bill, I want to throw it back to you. And, of course, you have seen many changes at the Opry over the decades. What are some of the biggest changes for you between the time you joined the cast in '61, fast forward? I mean, does anything jump out in your mind?
Well, obviously, the move from the Ryman to the Grand Ole Opry House, doesn't get much more major than that. in recent years, the format has changed a little bit out of necessity, I guess, when COVID hit and we went that entire year doing shows without an audience and very spaced out on the stage and everything. They revised the format where it had been, as Mark was talking about a while ago, where one person is hosting the show and introducing the other artists and stuff. It's gone to back really kind of the way it was back in the old days with George D. Hay, where one person, the announcer, introduces the artists and the artists come on and do their songs and they don't introduce the other people. And that's a change, that has happened as far as, the show is concerned. The show for years was kind of something you achieved as an artist. You reached a certain point in your career and then you were asked to be on the Grand Ole Opry or later maybe become a member of the Opry. And today the Opry is open to so many people who've just made their first record or even getting ready to make their first record. It's become more of an open door for the younger artists. And that's a change. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I've heard people, comment on it both ways. I see both sides of it, but there have been a lot of changes.
Let me ask you: is there any requirement now for Opry members to perform a specific number of nights per year? Is there any requirement still?
If there is, they hadn't told me. I love to be there as often as I can. Is there a requirement now?
The last I heard was like they asked them to make at least 10.
10 appearances.
And I don't know if that's
in the
still
old days,
case.
Bud. I don't know if this was in your years. When you said it was 26 weeks, that was 26 Saturday nights. That didn't even count Friday nights. And of course, now they've got the Tuesday night, and in the summer Wednesday, and all kinds of different nights. But the minimum of 10, I think, is 10 overall. Like it counts Tuesday, or it counts Wednesday, or Friday, or whatever. Just as long as you're there 10 times.
I think if you love the Opry, they shouldn't have to have a maximum or a
Exactly.
minimum.
Yeah.
I think you should be there when you can.
Bingo.
Jeannie has been there more.
Oh, ask her. She'll tell you how many times. 5,000.
I
What
know
is
more times on the Opry than anybody else. How did you count all those years?
A gentleman named Byron Fay had, as a hobby, and you may know of him, Paul, logged the Grand Ole Opry. He and another gentleman both logged the Grand Ole Opry as a hobby, but Byron's records, I think, were more complete. And so he and Ron Harmon got together and they figured up how many I had made. Actually, according to the records, tonight will be my 5,317th performance. But that's not enough. Don't anybody get the idea that I'm done here. No, that's not enough. Actually, there were more, but we only talk about the ones that we can verify. But a lot of the matinees that we used to do were not logged. So,
Jeannie, while you're talking, can you take the same question I tossed to Bill? Are there any major changes you think about in the Opry over the 56 years you've been there that really stand out in your mind?
yeah, there's a lot of what Bill mentioned, and my only concern about what he said, that people are maybe not even made their first record yet, or it's not released yet. To me, the Opry shouldn't be a building stage like that. It should be something you reach for. And I think that if it was left at that, when you get, and of course it's all streams now, so, and I don't understand how that works, but to me, you need to reach a certain level before you get the opportunity. That's what keeps the Grand Ole Opry on the level that we've tried to always keep it on. And also, by the other side of that, I think the people would appreciate it more, the artists would appreciate it more, and be more loyal to it. And like, yeah. Through the years, I want to say with the, like Bill mentioned, a lot of the people were leaving. We've seen the Opry hasn't always been popular. I remember when people were saying, why do you want to do the Opry? And they said the same thing to the musicians. Why would you still want to go out there? I remember thinking too, and I still believe this, that somewhere along the way, I thought I not only am fortunate to be here, but this is also a responsibility. You need to be here when you don't feel like it, when you maybe would rather be doing something else and you had to make a choice. But you need to be here to make sure the Opry stays here. In the back of my mind, I'm always thinking somewhere there's a little 12-year-old girl who wants to be on this stage just as much as I did. So I feel like we have an obligation to be there and represent the Opry.
Right. Bud, you alluded to some turmoil at the Opry when you got there, that there were artists who had left and you were sent in to kind of steady the ship. Were there any specific changes you recall making when you became general manager of the Opry to try to make things better?
Well, I did make a concerted effort to put some bluegrass on every Opry. And I thought it was well accepted. To me it was, at any rate. One of the things that has changed in my mind is people forget that the Opry was more than a musical show. It was more of a variety. We had an Archie Campbell. We had Cousin Jody. People don't even remember the name Cousin Jody. But we had comedians on the show. And most of the artists, I don't know about the Po' Boys, do you have a comedian in your troupe, Bill? I don't know.
They all thought they were comedians, whether they were or not.
But you have a Cousin Oswald, or many of the groups carry a comedian with them, and it makes a more of a variety show, and I think that's changed a great deal.
Well, if I may interrupt just a second, I want to say, because Dan Rogers, who is the general manager of the Opry, is here this afternoon, and Dan and Gina Keltner, the talent director, have gone out of their way to reinstate some comedy on the Opry. They've made Gary Mule Deer a member, Henry Cho a member, and nearly every performance, somebody is on there now doing comedy, and I commend them for that. I thank them for that, because I think the Opry needs it. We need to laugh.
Yeah.
So let me toss it to Mark here. Mark, when did you and Bill Anderson first meet? Because I know he wrote your first #1 hit. So where does that relationship start?
I think one of the very first times I was ever at the Opry. I'm from a little town in North Georgia called Blue Ridge. Bill's from Commerce, and I think that was one of the very first. Between Bill and myself and Miss Jeannie, I think these were the two first people I met when I first came to the Opry back in '97. My first performance on the Opry was '97, but I had come to some of the events, the CMA Fest, or back when we called it Fanfare. I had done some stuff, and we had all met back then, and those are the beginning memories of my career, '96, '97.
How did it happen that Bill's song, Wish You Were Here, got to you and you ended up recording it?
Honestly, so Nashville is full of great songwriters, especially, in my opinion, back in the beginning of my career. There were great songwriters. And I always felt like I had a writing deal. I always felt like, for me, I sang better songs than I wrote. And so I always, when I would go into the record-making process, I would want, whoever was pitching me songs, whoever was pitching them to Mercury Records, I would want those songs sent to me with no writer, no publishing company. I didn't want to know anything about who wrote the song. I didn't want to know what publisher it was with. I wanted to listen to the song. I wanted the song to speak to me. And so I didn't know that Wish You Were Here was written by Mr. Bill, Skip Ewing, Debbie Moore. I didn't know that until I want to say I had already recorded the song and started doing the album credits and finding out. That was then and is sort of still my process now for finding great songs.
All right, when I send that song to you, I'm not putting my name on it. You just forget that we talked.
No, we've already talked about that one. I'm looking forward to that one. But yeah, I think that so often people, they attribute songs that are on an artist's record to, they wrote it. And there's a lot of great artists that felt like they found their way into the music industry. I was a demo singer. So I was singing other people's songs from day one. I was hired to go into the studio and sing songs for different songwriters and stuff like that. So that's kind of how the door opened for me back in 1993, 94, 95.
That's interesting. I want to give us a chance to see another video clip, and if you all will bring up the video we have of Jeannie.
Make the world go away. Oh, get it off my shoulders. Say the things you used to say. And make the world go away. Do you remember when you loved me, before the world took me astray? Oh, if you do, then forgive me and make the world go away. Make the world go away. And make the world go away. I'm sorry if I hurt you. I'll make it up day by day. Just say you love me like you used to, and make the world go away. Make the world go away. Get it off my shoulders. Say the things you used to say. Please make the world go away.
I know that was written by your ex-husband, Hank Cochran, Country Music Hall of Fame member Hank Cochran. It's not one of your signature songs, but you did such a great job on that. And you did that performance on TV in 1967, which was such a big year for you. Obviously, the year you're inducted into the Grand Ole Opry. You won a Grammy that year for Don't Touch Me. It was a big year. at that point, you know, you're a member of the Opry in '67. Were things ever at a point where you felt like, as I asked Bill earlier, I don't know, maybe I could make more money doing something besides the Opry on Saturday night? Did that ever occur to you?
No, I never, ever considered leaving the Opry. Number one, I never wanted to. Number two, I made the promise that I never would, and I try to keep my promises if possible. Also, it's true you could make more money out there on the road, but also so could the people who were telling us to leave the Opry and go out there. And I always have a way of looking behind. Why are they saying to me what they're saying? So, yeah, that they could make more money if we were out there. But also, I've always felt, and still do today, there's way more to life than making money. And making me happy is number one with me. I'm the only one I gotta please when it's all over, and I'm happy being there, so.
All right. So I want us to pull up a photo, Amy, of the night. I think we call this photo "The Show Must Go On." As we all know, the Opry's a live show, and sometimes things go wrong on live shows, and I'm sure you all, maybe not Mark, will remember this.
I know what this is.
Do you?
Yeah.
In 1982.
Even though I remember.
1982, so the stage curtain for the Grand Ole Opry at the Grand Ole Opry House would not go up. And Roy Keff and his band are ready to go on, and they had to play from behind the curtain. Meanwhile, other cast members, technicians are all trying to raise the curtain. And apparently there was a little bit of laughter about it, but the show went on. By any chance, Jeannie or Bill, were you there that night the curtain got stuck?
No, I don't think I was. But we had a similar instance when Jack Green and I were working together. And we opened the show with Fox on the Run, Bluegrass. And you might have requested that. But Brian Sterling was playing guitar with us then, but he also played five-string banjo. So when Fox on the Run, Brian's got his banjo on playing it, and he's playing the theme, and his Fender guitar was leaning like this against the monitor in the front, and this curtain went up, and the fringe caught the tuning knobs, and Brian, I'm looking at Brian's face, and he's like, I can't quit playing, but there goes my Fender. So we started hollering, and they lowered the stage curtain back down, and we were able to get his guitar off and go on with Fox on the Run. But
that's great. And in fact, the reason I introduced this segment is I wondered if any of you, besides that one that you just shared with us, Jeannie, if any of you have a memory of something, kind of a blooper moment, something that went wrong or was funny at the Opry. I'm sure many, many times these things have happened, but anything stand out in your mind, Bill?
We were at the Ryman one hot summer Saturday night, and of course the Ryman was not air conditioned. They kept the windows open all around the building, and various bugs and insects would come in and make themselves at home. And I was on the stage singing, and a bug came in one of the windows, and I inhaled, and that bug went right down my throat. And I'm standing there going, ah! Ernest, the bands would, the next band up or something, they would be standing on the stage getting ready to go on. Ernest Tubbs' band was next, and Jack Drake, Pete Drake's brother, who played bass in the Troubadours at that time, I'm standing there going, ah! He leaned over in my ear and he said, let the bug sing.
I just have to ask, is that when you started whispering? Just wondering.
Very shortly after that, yes.
Anybody else? Any funny memories of things that might have gotten a little awry?
Nobody has mentioned that we canceled a show one night.
Was that in 1968 with the assassination of Martin Luther King?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and tell us about that.
having the marchers that had been going up and down Fifth Avenue, and we'd planned to have the show, and the mayor called, Mayor Briley called and told me, he said, you got to cancel the show. And I said, oh no, you can't cancel the Grand Ole Opry. He said, you cancel the Opry tonight, we're not going to risk a problem. And we canceled the show. Some of the artists that night, I found out later, went down to Roy Acuff's apartment over, he had I think he called it the Roy Acuff Exhibits on Broadway. He had an apartment above it where he stayed part of the time, and made an attempt at some sort of a presentation that some of the people went down there, and he allowed some of them to come up to the apartment, and so that doesn't really count as a Grand Ole Opry, but a performance went on of some sort. It was a sad occasion.
It's just like when the pandemic, as Bill said, Bill and I were actually on the show that first night. Unfortunately, Circle had cameras there, and they did some interviews, but they didn't turn on the cameras that I know of for what we did on stage. But I mean, I remember I sent an email the first thing saying, please let us do a broadcast, because you know, we do have an audience. We have an audience all over the world. We just don't have an in-house audience. But Bill and I share that memory also.
Yes, we did. Somebody asked me later, said, what was it like being on the stage with nobody in the audience? I said, well, for me, it wasn't all that different. Said, I've been playing to empty auditoriums for years.
Well, I know when that was, you know, after that one show, when the Opry started regularly broadcasting on the Circle Network, and there was no audience, but they had shows. Those were some amazing, intimate shows. I mean, I remember enjoying those very much. It was a different kind of Opry show, but it was just as good in its own way.
It was good. I just want history to say that we did that first one, because I've read so many where they say the first night without it was the televised, and it was not, because that was a tough night to do.
It was me and you and Connie Smith.
And Michael Cleveland and Mandy Barnett, I think.
That's a good night. That's a good show. Mark, I don't want to cut you short. Do you have any funny story you want to share with us from your time at the Opry?
Nope.
That's fine.
I'm living by the old Opry code, that a lot of those things that happen in the back. You keep your mouth shut, and you just walk away with that memory. There's so, you know, not really on stage. I can't think of anything that has happened to us on stage, but just some of the fly on the wall moments that I've got to be a part of in history, with little Jimmy Dickens and Porter Wagner, people like that, Bill, you know, Jeannie. Yeah, no, I'm not going to write a book. I'm telling you right now. I take that code very seriously. There's some things that live right here rent-free, and that's where they stay, and that's where they're going to stay.
Well, as some people know, and I think you're kind of alluding to this, Mark, you know, anybody who is a civilian like me who gets to go backstage, you hear some of the greatest music just played in dressing rooms, people rehearsing, people jamming. It's, you know, the love of music at the Grand Ole Opry is so palpable, not just on the stage, but backstage, right?
Absolutely. I think that some of the greatest performances in the Opry House, and probably the Ryman, and any place that the Grand Ole Opry has ever been, some of the greatest performances were in the dressing rooms. You know, I mean, typically when I'm there, and I don't know why, but it's sort of just worked itself out. They always put me in Mr. Roy's dressing room number 1, And I take that. There's sort of an unspoken rule that goes with dressing room number one. And if you were, and I never got to meet Mr. Roy, but the story was always told to me that dressing room number one door never closed. That door never closes. And Mr. Roy always wanted anybody that was maybe a new artist that was coming into the Opry for the first time, or a friend or anybody else. He never wanted them to walk past his dressing room and feel that they were unwelcome, or that they couldn't stop in and say hello. And typically that's what a closed door means, is that, hey, stay out. So go ahead and get that. But for me, in all seriousness, like I truly believe that in that dressing room, that door always stays open. And right next to dressing room number one is the bluegrass room. And there's, and Ricky and his guys are always in there. Daly and Vincent are always in there. Doyle Lawson was there. I mean, you can go on and on and on and on about the great music that's always backstage. And I truly believe some of the greatest performances that have ever happened in those buildings never happened on stage. They happened backstage.
Bill or Jeannie, do either of you have anything to add about Roy Acuff's open door policy? Was there anything to say about that?
I can tell you a funny story.
Please.
That I probably shouldn't tell.
Now, we just went over that. Don't tell the stories.
Well, it was pretty funny at the time. Mr. Roy, in his later years, had some vision problems. He couldn't see real well. And I was in his dressing room one night, and I'd asked him something, and something came up, and he said, well, I can't see that. I cannot see well enough to whatever it was. I don't know. And about that time, a really good-looking woman walked by outside the dressing room with a bright red dress on and a little, what do y'all call those little things? Just a little ankle bracelet. Little thin, little ankle bracelet right above her high-heeled shoe. Mr. Acuff saw that. He couldn't see anything else. He turned to me, did you see that good-looking blonde in that red dress with that gold ankle bracelet? He saw it all.
Which may be the real reason Mr. Acuff left his dressing room door open.
There you go.
It wasn't to welcome you in, as we've been led to believe. It was so he could see what went down the hall. History.
Well, we're almost coming to time here, so I'd like to kind of go along the panel, and we'll start with you, Mark, and kind of work our way back to Bill. Here we are. We're at 2023. Look into your crystal ball, Mark. What do you see in the future for the Opry?
I think Bill, Miss Jeannie, alluded to it. I think that there was a time at the Opry when Bill Anderson was the new guy on the Opry. There was a time when Jeannie Seeley was the new lady on the Opry. I think that as it goes forward, I think that there are going to be people like myself, like Brad, that want to continue that tradition of the Opry, that want the Opry. I understand that things are going to change. I understand that the music's going to change a little bit sometimes and whatever, but I think that the traditions of the Opry, that a lot of us want those traditions to stay the same. We want to keep some of that alive. And I think that there will be times when new things come into the Opry. I think there'll be times when we want to keep very much the tradition of the Opry alive. And I look forward to that. I mean, I feel like I'm young enough right now that hopefully, I just turned 50 last month. I'd like to say that I'm going to be at the Opry for the next 50 years, and I look forward to seeing what that has to bring.
Very good. Mr. Wendell, do you have any thoughts on what might be in the future for the Grand Ole Opry at this point?
Well, yes, I guess I do. I see no reason why it can't continue to grow and get a greater amount of coverage, and I'll say worldwide. There's no reason. We had a fond idea. In fact, we rented a satellite back in the early satellite days, for the Opry and put it up. And I know I told the board at that time, 90% of the people in the world can listen to the Grand Ole Opry. I don't know that they are, but it was available to 90% of the people of the world. I think that could happen. I see no reason why it can't happen, and it would be a big boost for the business if it needs a boost, and it sure is doing well without it, but it never hurts to give a boost. And with the success, after we decided to invest rather significant money down here into this new Hall of Fame, it has only grown the Opry. It's only grown country music. And there's no reason why it can't continue to grow and expand. If I were still involved in the business end of the company, which I'm not, but if I were, I think I might be looking around to see if we couldn't buy some additional property down here to have facilities that were accommodating to all of these wonderful tourists that keep coming in. And I think that's very much of a possibility.
Very good.
Like what would you put, Mr. Wendell? If you had the
I see them. I see them walking the streets down here, and I see all the girls in their groups
I'll bet
and
you
their
do.
outfits and so forth. But I also don't want to forget that I was involved down here on Broadway when it wasn't like it is today, when it was the hookers and it was the itinerant preachers and all of that. And it took a long time for us to get out of that and get into a respectable business, if you'll say that. And I think that there's plenty of
You don't
room.
think there's any down there now, huh? I'm just asking for a friend.
Oh, no.
Sure you are.
I did want to mention one thing I'd forgotten when I mentioned comedians. I forgot to mention Jerry Clower. Jerry was a significant part of the Opry for a number of years, and somehow our memories fade and forget some of those people that have gone on. And I just wanted to mention Jerry Clower, because I thought he was a fine, fine gentleman.
Jeannie, any thoughts about what might the future hold for the Grand Ole Opry?
Well, I thought when we got to this part, I would say, I'm only answering questions that are multiple choice. No, I think that Mark had a good point when we've got younger artists that do understand the value of the Opry. I would hate to think that it ever goes to where it's considered just another venue, just another concert hall, because it should never, ever lose the incredible American institution that it is. But the artists can't do that alone. We've got to make sure we always have people in management who, as we call it, get it, and that they carry it on. Like you say, it needs to grow, but we need to always remember country music. We need to always remember where we came from, and that this wonderful city has grown because Grand Ole Opry was a cornerstone. And that's what I don't want to be lost. So I think hand in hand with the artists that come on board and the management like Dan Rogers, Dan has been very unique in that he knows the history, he understands the traditional, but he's got his pulse right on what's happening today. And I have to say, and this sounds like I'm brown-nosing, but I do think he's doing a really pretty good job of balancing. We don't always agree on all of them, but like I said, he's got his faults. But I do think, my point is that the artist and the management need to work together, in my mind, to carry it forward.
Bill, I'll give you the last word. What do you see in the future?
I agree with everything that has been said up and down here. I think when me and my contemporaries, me and Mel Tillis and Roger Miller and Willie Nelson and people in the early 60s, Tom T. Hall, Loretta Dolly, when we came here, we didn't do it the same way that the Fruit Jar Drinkers and the Gully Jumpers and Sam and Kirk McGee did it. And I'm sure some of them looked at us and thought we were crazy. And the people that are going to do it from here are going to do it different from the way that we've done it. And just hope that it'll be, as Jeannie says, that the Opry will never become just another venue, that it'll always be that very special place. I love the nights when the new artists come out on the stage, and some of them will either get down on their knees in that circle, almost like they're praying, or just out of so much respect. I've seen them get down there and kiss those boards that came from the Ryman in that magic circle. I hope we never lose that. And I'd like to say just one more thing real quick, if I can. Bud Wendell did what he said he set out to do. He brought us together at a time when we needed to be brought together. And for the fans, I want y'all to know, this man came to me one time in October. There was the disc jockey convention that was going on. And a lot of fans had come from different places pretending to be disc jockeys, saying that they were disc jockeys. They had gotten credentials and had come into the DJ convention. And it had gotten to the point where, Bud, and you know this, and you're smiling and you're right, it had become where the artists, we could not visit with the legitimate disc jockeys because there were so many people pretending to be disc jockeys. Do you remember our conversation in the stairwell at the Capitol Park Inn?
Very well. Yeah, you came down off of the stage. You'd finished performing, and I was down at the footsteps anyhow, and I remember you said, Wendell, these people are not DJs, these are fans. You got to do something about it. And I said...
And this man said, and I quote, he said, we're going to do something about it. We're going to have a convention just for the fans. And that was the birth of Fanfare. And that's the man that did it right there.
Yeah, right.
I have one very special bond with Mr. Wendell. I was doing all the military tours, and some of them very grueling. And at times I wonder, why am I doing this? Why don't I go home? And because I didn't do USO tours, they were all independent. And so when I would be so tired or half sick and wishing I could go home, when I'd get to that base and I'd see that flag, and it was like, that's why you're doing that. You have the option to quit and go home, but these guys don't. And so you need to stay here too. But that flag got to mean more and more to me than it ever had in my life. And so every time I'd go toward the base through Thailand and some of those places, and I'd look for that flag, I got home, and they always had it by the stage. I got home and I went to the Opry, and I immediately looked for the flag, and I didn't see it. I went in Mr. Wendell's office, and I said, do we not have a flag on the stage? And he said, well, I'm not sure. Let's go look around. So we came out of his office, looked at the stage, and you took me to the storage room there. And he said, I guess we don't, but there will be. So thank you again for doing that.
Well, all right, this has been a wonderful panel. Thank you all Thanks to our panelists.